And all right, we're in illuminated manuscripts. What kinds of factors? I'm trying to think of the. I have a couple of questions. The one is the big question, but I'm going to try to save that one for a little bit. What kinds of factors cause the spread or the wider use of illuminated manuscripts? What kinds of factors figured into that? What do you got, buddy? Kind of backing up a little bit. What kinds of things did people need to make these illuminated manuscripts? I'm not asking this question right, am I? This is a great start. Light? That's interesting, sure.
You said it's illuminated manuscripts?
Well, if I say illuminated manuscript, what does it mean? Speak up, please. Well, certainly has letters, it has writing. What else does it have?
Pictures.
Ink, yeah. Okay, so you need materials. I think we left off after St. Patrick, we got to this piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
What kinds of factors produce this kind of artwork, this kind of manuscript writing? What kinds of things went into this? Try to put it into a cultural context. The stories. What kinds of stories?
Heroic stories.
Heroic. What kinds of things? Who was doing this work? Do you know? Who was making these copies?
Illustrators.
You know, sometimes in review, I get to figure out what it is that I skipped over, right? Where was this work being done? Like, for instance, let's start with that. The Book of Kells, where was it done? Boy, I did a, this was where we kind of left off the other day, you know, but I think I was in a hurry. Anybody know where the Book of Kells is from? No? Oh, come on now. Wait a minute, what about this guy? Let's go back. What about him?
Roman.
What did he do? He was chasing Romans, right?
Okay.
All right, and who did he kidnap and bring back?
St. Patrick.
To where?
Ireland.
Ireland. I know it's 8 in the morning. Okay, so I did kind of cover that, right? All right, then St. Patrick, they call him St. Patrick for reasons, right? What kinds of reasons? What did he do? Yeah, you know, he was like a monk or a priest, and he brought Christianity to Ireland. Ireland was completely pagan before that, right? And Ireland was every year at springtime, like right around this time of the year, the kings of these little counties, you know. My dad came from Ulster. He was born in Ulster County in Northern Ireland. The Ulster County would decide to invade or to make war with Connacht, you know, or Derry. You know, in other words, they would every spring go to war. After Patrick came, a couple of things happened: the spread of Christianity and the cessation of war for about 6 centuries. They stopped having wars every spring, and they also were very interested in this kind of activity. And I'll just tell you, in the monasteries across Ireland, they were busy copying manuscripts. Somebody tell me, based on what you heard the other day, what is a manuscript?
A manuscript is a handwritten.
Yeah, handwritten. That's correct. It could be 1 page, it could be 10 pages, it could be a whole book. But that's what makes it a manuscript, is that it's handwritten. Okay? Now, and he pulls up this image right here. What makes it an illuminated manuscript? illustrations, fancy capitals, even on a regular page of the Book of Kells, right? By the way, what is contained in the Book of Kells? Does anybody know? What is it?
Book of, like saying your sins or saying something you're wrong.
It's the New Testament.
What's the book that you talking about that you recite all those things?
That's earlier. We were talking about the Book of the Dead. That's the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Now that's interesting, and so manuscripts go way back. If you were well-to-do enough and you were being buried, you had a manuscript created for you called the Book of the Dead, which allowed you to recite things in the afterlife that would allow you to enter into eternal life. The Egyptians were really big into that. Okay. So we know that the monks, and this seems like a duh, they're churchmen, they're going to copy the sacred text of the Bible, right? What else did they copy? Do you know? We mentioned it the other day. We mentioned at least one kind of thing, and I use that as an example. So for instance, the first slide in this PowerPoint, this one right here. What is this book? It's got the title right there. You can read it. I'm trying to make this rounded point that the monks that were copying these manuscripts didn't just copy. This is for the Vatican. This was actually in Rome. That they made copies of the Bible. They made copies of Virgil's poetry. They made copies of Aristotle, Plato, all of the famous philosophers and writers and poets that went before from the ancient Greek and Roman Empire, and any source that they could get a text, they would copy it. Do you remember we discussed this idea? Why were they interested in that? What motivated them to, first of all, to copy the Bible over and over again? A lot of labor involved in that. I'm going to ask that question right now. This is the big question. Write down this question and see if you can figure out an answer. During the time of these illuminated manuscripts, if someone wanted to buy a Bible, which by the way we know that they did, people did buy a Bible back then, okay? About how much did it cost, do you think? Let's take bids on that. Come on, somebody give me a bid.
Like, do you want to do like our modern day money or like?
Use our modern day money. I don't know what their money was like, really.
Yeah, me either. I think
$500. That's what you. Okay, $500. Do I hear another figure?
I'm thinking like maybe 400.
All right, you're down. You went down. 400. You're going the wrong direction. 2,000. Do I hear 2,000? Do I hear 2,500? 2,500. Do I hear 10,000? 1 million. Do I hear 2 million? Anybody? Nobody wants to. Okay, so you guys are stopping at 1 million?
No, I'm taking 2.
Go ahead.
Take 2 million.
You take 2. 3?
0.5
Hmm?
1.5 million.
No, you're way high now. It's about $5 million. They have documents where not a nobleman, but someone who was part of that growing middle class because of growing trade across the world. This person commissioned a Bible. Now, to commission a Bible, he had to wait like 5 years to get it to him. It takes that long to make it. They have to, at that time, they would have to skin deer and turn that into vellum, into the page that you see on for instance, in the Book of Kells. That's all on vellum, deer hide. Then they had to, of course, create the inks. You mentioned the inks. Some of these inks were rather interesting. For instance, to make a blue, that was the last thing I said on Tuesday. What did they make that blue out of?
Sapphire.
Not sapphires, but lapis lazuli. Yeah, you're onto it there. So if you look at these colors, you're looking at that blue. That's actually ground down gemstone. The red would be ground flowers imported from India. very, very expensive. People would actually commit, when they commissioned a Bible or they commissioned any work that had illustrations in it, they would say, I want so many square inches or so of blue, and I'm willing to pay the price for that blue. You didn't just have blue, you had a lot of dirt colors, browns. You had a lot of black and brown that were easy to use. Timothy, you going to work on getting here earlier? Well, today's the day, buddy. Okay.
I had to go back.
I hear you, bud. All right, so there was that expense, and then of course just the labor of carefully copying these pages down. So they have it on record that a guy commissioned a Bible during the Middle Ages, and he sold in exchange for it, 3 farms, 2 vineyards, a couple of flocks of cattle. And these properties and all that stuff added together, if you were to price it out in today's money, it would come up to about $5 million. By the way, there's somebody out in the Midwest. They're in the middle of a manuscript project, making a manuscript of the Bible again, and they just wanted to do it in the modern age with modern aesthetics and modern decoration and stuff. They're doing it as a labor of love, right? I think one of the other things that I left off with on Tuesday was this idea that when I was learning art history, we were taught that all of this early Christian art that we're looking at was done because people were being beat up and forced to do it. And it defies logic, doesn't it? Sure, you could make me copy a Bible, I guess, right? By the way, it was a job, it was a gig. You had a couple of things that you could do. You could be a farmer in the Middle Ages. You could be, a soldier. Or maybe you could become a monk and learn your letters. But by the way, during this time, about how many people were, percentage-wise, were literate, could read and write? How many could? Out of 100%, what percent do you think people could read or write?
3%.
Yeah, 3, somewhere around there. Very few people. And if you could read or write, it was a status symbol. It was like, I can read and write. I've got my letters, they would say. Now, look, not everybody could afford a Bible, right? But people did this stuff where they would commission what they call a book of hours. Was anybody in here raised Catholic? In a Catholic church? I've got my hand up. My mom and dad were both Irish Catholic, okay? And we grew up, we went to Mass. We very, very rarely actually read the Bible. But in Catholic Church, they had little things, missives that we would get, little bulletins and missives that might have a verse from the Bible and then explain a little bit about it. And it went through the calendar. This missive would change throughout the year. Now, some of this stuff survives into Protestant churches. They have calendar things that they do that coincide with holidays and so forth. Well, that's what a book of hours was. It was a guide through the masses that were going to happen throughout the 52 weeks of the year. And so if you couldn't afford a Bible, $5 million, right, or you didn't want to spend that kind of money, you would commission something like a book of hours. I'm skipping around here. By the way, the manuscript era includes the Islamic manuscripts and Hebrew manuscripts. And this is what I want to finish with on illuminated manuscripts, this next one. The Limborg brothers. This is called the Very Rich Book of Hours, or my French is not as good. The très riche, les très riches hours. Who speaks any French in here? The Duc de Berry. Anybody got some French? My French is horrible. My pronunciation is. However, if you look at the title, if you translate it, it's the Very Rich Hours of the Duke of Berry. Duc de Berry, okay, and it was commissioned. The Limborg brothers were the ones that executed it. By the way, this image, I think I stuck this image up as our banner, and I forgot to reduce it. So if you go up on Blackboard right now and you look at this, you will see a real extreme close-up of this, right? See the beautiful detail. Oh, by the way, you notice how much blue is going on in here, and these are. Compared to, I gotta cut the lights. Fantastic illustrations. I don't know about you guys, but once in a while, I will find that these captions that they put next to the image, right? That there'll be something really interesting in there. We've got the title. It happens around 1413, between 1413 and 16. You know what that means when they say that 1413 and 16? They're not guessing about when it happened. They're saying that it was produced during that 3-year period. So even this kind of book that would have maybe 24 pages in it took that long to produce. And of course they're lavishing a lot of attention on this. We mentioned this idea about lavishing the attention on the copied manuscripts, especially things that had to do with the Bible. What was the reason for that? I want to, because it's one of my theories about what makes the engine of human enterprise work. We have people getting rich or getting wealth and have the ability, the leisure and the ability to produce things like this, right? We also have the desire to produce it. We mentioned in Christianity, what is paramount above all things? Yeah, but Jesus, and you're correct, okay, of course, but the connection to him being the Word of God. That it's not just that, he said things that people wanted to understand or believe. It's that he himself embodied it and that he was the Word. And so you have this high value on the Word. And the idea of, if I want to reach a certain height, literacy is a big deal to me. And these manuscripts are some of the most, these are the most valuable things that people have, beyond price. So, well, I express that, the monks would express this by lavishing piles and piles of illustration on these illuminated manuscripts to emphasize how important and cool this stuff was to them. All right. And by the way, up above you can see there's like the signs of the zodiac. It's telling you what what part of the calendar year this is. One of the things that I want to look up, somebody use your phone and translate, please, because I'm not good with centimeters. 22.5 by 13.6 centimeters. Somebody find out what size that is in inches, please. Because the reason I'm bringing that up is, would you, if I didn't tell you that, if I didn't mention the size of it, how big would you guess this thing is? I mean, it's a pretty detailed painting, isn't it? About how big do you think that is? Hold up hands and show me what you think. Is it this big? Maybe that big, like that? Because it's taller than it is wide, right? This big right here? Somebody found that 22.5?
Yeah. So I found out it's like, hold on, right? It's
8.8 high by 4 point what?
4.9.
It's not even a whole page like a copy page. It's ridiculously, meticulously detailed. And of course, they're famous because, by the way, part of the reason this book of ours is famous is that it is considered by many to be like an ancestor, a predecessor to ideas of painting that happened during the Renaissance, growing out of that period during the Quattrocento. But this is in the north, and it reflects the northern aesthetic. This looks like what would become a painting later, right? By the way, they never finished the book. They never finished it. Can anybody guess why? You think the Duke was disappointed because they didn't finish it? No. You know why? He was dead. So were the Limbourg brothers. So was everybody else in the town there. They all died of plague. All right, so that finishes illuminated manuscripts. Do you have an idea of the value of one of these books at this point, right? Not a test question, but a kind of a review. Does anybody remember how many books were in the library during the Middle Ages at Oxford? Was it Oxford or Cambridge? I can't remember which.
25?
Yeah, 26 books. And it was considered to be like the greatest collection in Europe. All right. Let's get out of here. And open this up. Printing comes to Europe. Who invented woodblock printing? Yes, the Chinese. That's correct. Who invented paper? Who invented movable type? The Chinese. The Chinese. The Chinese. They had all this stuff, right? What was the reason? And these are test questioning moments. What was the reason that literacy didn't suddenly expand in China as soon as they invented all this stuff?
Each place had like different words.
Say that again, sir.
Each place had like a different set of words.
Yeah, how many characters did they have potentially in their letters? Thousands and thousands, right? So very difficult to codify and mass produce until much later. They created a simple set of kanji. So, but the paper made its way from the Far East into Europe. The invention of paper. The idea of woodblock printing made its way from there as well. And then, little by little, you get advances in technology related to printing. And I'm just going to show you these. This is interesting to graphic designers, I think, because these are early watermarks. What is a watermark? What do you think it is? Somehow it's a mark made with water.
It's like your stamp to show that it's,
that it's yours. You'll see, like if you go up and look for stock photos or something, they put a faded set of letters across it, or a logo, right, to indicate that it's theirs. Okay. Well, paper makers did this. That's where by the way, you can buy paper with watermarks in it. That's usually an indication that it's pretty nice paper. They call it classic laid paper. Classic laid. Remember we talked about how paper is made with the net? That means you're laying it, right? This is as opposed to all of this paper that we're seeing here. The paper that we see in here was rolled out on a massive produced machine for paper making. Classic laid is made one sheet at a time, or one area of sheets at a time. And then what they did is they created these marks that were made of metal that would sit in the vat below the paper while it was being made, and it would just impress itself into the paper as it settled down into the net. And that's what a watermark is. Yes, ma'am. Oh yeah. Oh, that logo of Starbucks goes way the heck back. Yeah, that's not a new thing at all. They adjusted it a little bit, right, to modernize it and make it cooler and actually a little less controversial. You'll notice the mermaid has her legs open. Yeah. Say that again?
That was their old logo, the very first one.
Yep. All right. And then you get this little invention, this little idea. This is kind of an interesting thing. Playing cards. So woodblock printing comes. What's one of the first things that they get to do with it? Why, they make playing cards. Let's see. What kind of in the Middle Ages, you're part of the peasant class, or you're middle class, lower middle class. You didn't play cards. Cards were something that nobility did. They had the time, the leisure to do this. A set of cards was a status symbol, just like reading and writing would be a status symbol. And the idea that these were printed, you could make larger editions of them, and therefore make them cheaper, but they were still valuable. And one of the effects that this had, and this is one of these things that happens when you spread out an innovation like that, where you let other people who in the past could not partake of it, when you let them get their hands on that, it has somewhat of what we call a democratizing effect. In other words, it kind of spreads the ability of a larger group of people to participate in entertainments of different kinds. So it's like it's a status thing. I'm playing cards. This is like what the king or the duke up in his castle is doing. So it has that sort of effect. So that's one of these were wildly popular. Can I ask you a question? Do you know how they would get multiple colors printed like that? Any ideas? If you wanted to print playing cards that have, this one has 2 colors, what would you have to do? See, you know what's interesting about this is nobody took printmaking. Did anybody take printmaking? Not yet. You took it? Did you guys do multicolor prints?
I think so, if I can remember correctly.
If you're making a multicolor print, what do you have to have?
Ink.
Of course, you have to have ink. I mean, some kind of brown, black there, and some kind of red, right? What do I need to do to make 2 different colors?
But you got printed twice.
I've got to carve it out of wood twice. One that has just the black ink outline and one that has the colors, right? Typically, they print the colors first and then they print the black outline on top of it. That's called trapping. It's funny, we're talking old technology here, but that word about trapping, that kind of thing is still in the technology that we use. I think the computer kind of removes us a little bit from the process. We don't see plates. We don't see wood blocks. We don't see the physicality of it. You can just print a mass line, an extensive line of something, and actually never see the print process. Let the printer just print it, right?
But technically, we still do that when it comes to graffiti or any type of stencil art.
Any type of stencil art.
Because when it comes to that, like spray painting, a lot of them don't spray paint multiple colors at one time. They stencil one color at a time.
Which I think you should if you can get an experience, get your hands on anything that uses a stencil or uses multiple plates so that you can see the process. I think it's valuable information for you in terms of design. All right, so then the other thing that was really popular, and by the way, this is, obviously by the way, these were much larger than our cards are today. They were, this is 13.5 by 8.3 centimeters, so it's larger than our typical cards size, right? And then the other thing that was very, very popular were broadsides. So write that word down, broadside. A broadside is just the broadside of a piece of paper, is what's meant by that.
How do you spell that?
Broad, B-R-O-A-D, S-I-D-E.
What is it?
It's just a sheet of paper with something published on it. And people would make these and sell them or hand them out. Remember the Chinese, they would publish the deeds of their ancestors, making rubbings. Well, here you're getting you would get something about, for instance, it would open up a section of scripture, or it would open up something about the stories of a saint. Here, what scene can you take apart the iconography of this scene? What do you see? Oh, maybe I should ask that question. What is iconography? Anybody see? Yeah. How many have had any art history before? You've not heard the word iconography yet? You have. Do you remember what it was about? Symbols that represent things. So we can understand the intent of the communication. The artist is using visual cues for us. So who are these people? Any ideas?
Is that a lady?
This is a lady.
Okay, so that's an angel.
This one here is an angel. Yeah, with the wings, right?
Yeah, I think it's an angel telling Mary.
Telling Mary. It's the Annunciation. That's exactly what it is. And it's got German blackhand letters. Basically, the letters are imitating their handwritten manuscript. Okay? And, to get the white, what must I do? If I'm going to have white in this, what do I need to do? If I'm going to create the woodblock for this. How do I do that? Yes. And by the way, I'm capturing this for a student that is getting this distance, and so I end up repeating your answers because I know he won't be able to hear that. You have to, in order for you to get a white area on a woodblock print, you have to scrape away all of that's going to be white. leaving only the raised edge that's going to be black. So when you look at the line work that's in here, we might look at this and say, well, there's a little bit of roughness in the drawing. Oh yeah, you go right ahead and carve out a wood block like that and see how fine yours comes out, right? So the technical skill involved in this was really something, all right? Okay, so, this is the state of things in the late Middle Ages. We're in the 1400s. We've got illuminated manuscripts that are highly valuable, priceless. A Bible is beyond cost for most people, right? Unless you're the king or a very rich noble. And then you have published, woodblock printed items, little pages that are called broadsides. By the way, the broadsides weren't just religious. They might have a broadside that would advertise a hiring fair, for instance. So they would put, just like you get, you see things up, bulletins that are put up. We're going to have an event. It's a big deal. Come to Art Splash or whatever it is that we do, and we try to hand out what we call flyers now, right? Similar ideas. So it would have to do with events, maybe some special thing that happened, they would publish about it, or something that was going to happen. So it would have all of these, publication needs or desires, and then you have the playing cards that were popular, right? Well, into this mix, you get this guy who was kind of a metalsmith. He was an engraver, Johann Gutenberg. Right? If you don't know the name, write it down. All right, Gutenberg heard about a fair that was going to be happening in a county near where he lived. He lived in Mainz, Germany, M-A-I-N-Z, Main or S, I'm not sure, Mainz, Germany. And he and his friends heard about a fair that was going to be happening the following spring, and they got together and they did research. They were on the idea of casting lead mirrors. Now, there are mirrors and there are mirrors. If you were really wealthy, you could afford what we have as a mirror now, where you have a sheet of glass and they put what we call silvering on the back of it. These days, they're going to use some other alloy, right? Because they can. Back then, the only way to have a mirror was to cover the back of it with silver. And, or lead. And these were very high, very, very expensive. By the way, pieces of glass back then, you didn't have pieces of glass like this. You had pieces of glass like this, small. You didn't have large sheets of glass. They, again, very expensive, very difficult to keep. So these guys were thinking about casting a whole bunch of these lead mirrors. It's just going to cast a smooth surface and have it be shiny just because it was smooth and just be metal. And they were going to sell these at the fair. But something happened. One of the things that was typically happening in Europe, what do you think it was? Plague. And so they didn't go, right? And so now they're sitting around with all this lead and thinking about it. By the way, I'm kind of having fun with the story. They're thinking about this lead, and Gutenberg, being the guy who basically what he would do is he would engrave your initials into a piece of jewelry. He would engrave, extensive things. He was excellent at cutting into surfaces of metal to create the image of typography, what we would later call typography, but to emulate a written manuscript. And they started thinking about this. And some of us who have studied this a couple times wonder if somehow they had heard of the Chinese movable type, or if it just came to them to think about this. Because, if I wanted to publish a page of written stuff and do a print, it would be woodblock, and I would have to carve out all the background area around it and all that. Very labor intensive. The woodblock would only last for X amount of time because wood will break down under that pressure. And so I could get a run of maybe a couple hundred, but that's about it. And then it would start cracking. And so Gutenberg was very familiar with the qualities of metals, and he was thinking about this, and they started working on research. Now, what do you need to do research? Really? Now, you guys are doing research in this class, different kind of research perhaps, right? Some of you are going to look up resources in the library, and you're going to produce your first abstract next Thursday for our exercising class. That's the ticket to get in on Thursday. But if you, let's say that you wanted to do a survey and you wanted to get 10,000 people to respond to it, what do you need to get that done? Huh?
People.
You need the people, right? But if I'm sending out a survey, how am I going to do that? Huh? Advertise. One way or another, it's going to cost you some money. Okay? Now, let's take it away from that area and think about this. Scientific research or industrial types of research. You know, any good big company will have people they call R&D, research and development. This Carnegie Mellon, right? Google, all these companies that are large like that, they spend millions of dollars a year on research. Now, Gutenberg was interested in the idea of this movable type. How did the Chinese make their type come out perfectly level on the surface? How did they do that? Do you remember?
They sent it into I would say they put it into like a block,
Mm-hmm.
and then they set it into it. It was the way it was positioned. It was positioned.
How did they make it stick? And how did they make it so that they could press it down and make it level? They dipped it in wax. The back of this plate that they were using, this box that they were putting it in, had wax. I'm not sure if it was soft or melted or otherwise, but they would stick it down and they would push it down with a board to make it level, right? Well, Gutenberg was trying to think of something where you could do something where it would be way more durable than that. And so his idea was, in order for this to work, you have to research the idea of how to get the metal to come out perfectly level, exactly the same each time. That sounds easier than it is, okay? So he got into an arrangement with this guy, Johann Fust. He borrowed money from Fust to do the research. Give or take, it took Gutenberg about 10 to 15 years to get this figured out, this process. And this is kind of like an idea of what it looks like. To make this idea happen, you use Gutenberg's skills about cutting, here I'll use a pointer, about cutting what we call a punch, just like an engraver would, but what he's doing is he's cutting away everything in the metal. This is steel, by the way. The punches were made of steel. And what they would do is then they would take that steel and push it into this thing right here that's called the matrix. Then they would use that. He created this idea of a movable, what you call a jig, where you can create, if I'm going to pour liquid metal into something, I need to be able to contain it. And so what this is the type, you had to be able to move the edges of it because an H is wider than an I, for instance, right? So he's creating all of these jigs and he's creating all of these things that creates molding and casting, right? And then he has to experiment with the kind of metals that are involved. Because when you cast metal, it's hot. And then when it cools, it actually during that process, it expands and contracts. And in order to get it to come out exactly the same level each time, he had to work out the exact formula. So that took a long time. So he's invented, to get this done, to think about creating little pieces of movable type. And I'm remiss, I meant to bring in, I have some samples of lead cast type that I was going to bring in. I'll bring it in next time we get together. What did he actually invent? What do you see here? I mean, what kind of activity is this? He's casting metal, right? He's creating jigs that can change their size, right? And he is aiming to make a recreation of a handcrafted item, right? An exact replica of a handcrafted item using a mass-producing technology. So really, at the bottom of it, what did Gutenberg actually invent? Was it just movable type? Say again? No, the typewriter comes later, but you're correct. It relates to it a lot, right? Where else do you see processes like this used? Yes, screen printing. Yeah, sure. That's right. That's true. What else? I'm looking at Anthony because I know at the bottom of it he probably knows. This process that you're looking at of casting stuff, like making some handcrafted item, right? And making it come out exactly the same each time so that it comes out perfectly level and creates a piece of usable machinery. Gutenberg is essentially inventing the industrial age. You don't get a Lamborghini without this kind of thing. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, for instance, Italian craftsmen could make a Lamborghini, one, right? Without this process. But then to make it exactly the same the next time, they need this process. This has to do with casting, molding, mass producing. So everything that is in this room, all of the items that were made in this room, use ideas and technologies that come from the Middle Ages and Gutenberg. That's what he was doing. So two things were happening simultaneously that were going to have a profound effect on the way we live right now. One, if he invents movable type, it's going to make books easier to get. It's going to spread literacy. But the other thing that it's doing is it is setting up the whole thing that happens later in the machine age. When we we mass produce items and people can buy them because they're cheap. Instead of a handmade mug that was made on a wheel, handcrafted, cost $15 or something like that, right? Anybody ever bought a ceramic mug like that? I love them, but they're objects of art almost, right? This thing, 50 cents, $1.50, whatever. You get the idea? All right. So this, by the way, the technology, it took, like I say, 15 years to get this figured out. He had to go back to Fust and borrow the money a couple of times because they would work and it wasn't exactly working. The other thing that was very awkward about this situation was Gutenberg was very interested in keeping this all very secret. He got it in his mind. I'm going to ask a trick question. What would you print if you had this technology back in the 1400s? If you could, what would you print?
Manuscripts.
I'd go to some kind of manuscript that exists, right? I'm aiming to make money, right? Okay. How much money am I aiming to make? Lots and lots of money. The Bible.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Think about that. A Bible's worth $5 million, right? What if I could print multiple copies of them?
I'm just like 25 copies.
All right. Now, somewhere in the middle, and he tried to keep the process very, very, very secret. Locked doors. Nobody can go in there, right? But it was difficult to keep a secret because he was running out of money. And then what he did was he did some stuff to make money. They got some success, and the first thing they printed was this. Now I can't read the Latin. I have some Latin, but I don't have that much. He's getting ready to print a Bible, right? But the first thing they print in order to make money is this. They were commissioned by the Pope, or by the Church, I should say, to create an indulgence. A sale of indulgence. This is a certificate of the announcement of a sale of indulgence. This is actually the indulgence itself. Now, I'm saying that word. What do you think I possibly could mean by that word, indulgence? Nobody's heard of sale of indulgences before? Fascinating. All right. Now, as someone who was raised Catholic, I can tell you that I grew up in a period when they didn't do this. All right? They didn't do this because of what happened afterwards. But this is what they would do. If you had enough money, you could buy a certain amount of get-out-of-jail-free card from hell or purgatory. Well, probably more accurately, purgatory. In Catholic theology, and I think some people still do this, in Catholic theology, you know, if you're really bad, you're going to hell, right? But if you're not that bad, but you've done some stuff and you didn't mean it, you got to work it out in the afterlife in what they call purgatory. And so this could take thousands of years, right? Well, what if I could pay some money to the church? It's like a good thing that I'm doing, right? Doesn't sound good, does it? And I get out of jail. I mean, I basically will knock off 1,000 years or something like that. Or better yet, I've got relatives that have passed away. And I'm worried about them. Because I know, you know, Uncle Joe, man, he kind of hit the bottle once in a while, right? Or some such, okay? Or I know that he told a lie once in a while. I know he did. So I know he's in purgatory. I tell you what, I'll buy an indulgence for him and get him out of jail. Does this sound kind of creepy? Just a little bit. Because what does it do to the rest of us? Well, shoot, we just get to work it out. You see what I'm saying? We just get to do it. So even before what's going to happen next happened, it was really controversial. The rich, they're showing off their power by buying out their way into heaven. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? You know, I mean, we're not so far away from that. You've got these guys on TV, you know, the televangelists sometimes can be like that. If you just send this money, you know, God will bless you, that kind of thing, right? So, you know, Gutenberg got paid well for this. And he continues working, right? Makes a lot of money. But Fust is getting really impatient and really curious because, you know, he loaned the money as an investment. He's thinking that at some point we're going to make a profit on this secret business that I don't know about. And then he's seeing this stuff. Gutenberg had an assistant, Peter Schoeffer. He did a lot of the work with the printing and the research and developing the typography. And they're working all this time. They're using the money to fund the production of this Bible. Now, think about, all right, so the advantage of the way that Gutenberg created the movable type and the casting process is this, right? The Chinese, when they wanted to make movable type, let's say that they've got a certain kanji, right? And on a page, it shows up 8 times. That means they have to have 8 individual carved versions of that kanji that will go into the page. What Gutenberg did was say, I've got a letter A. It shows up a lot. I cast it. I make the punch and the matrix and the mold once, and I can cast hundreds or thousands of them. And I make casts of every letter in the alphabet. And of course, in German or in English, we've got a smaller alphabet, 26 letters or so. Okay? So it's way easier, I should say, than the Chinese to get this technology to work with the idea. So they cast multiples of the letters of each one with different ligatures and initial caps and all kinds of beautiful typography that they create, right? And then they are busy setting these into a matrix, into a block that they're going to use to print, just like woodblock printing, okay? And they're working on it and working on it and working on it, and it's taken 15 years, and they're just about ready to finish this Bible, a printed series of the 42-line Bible. That's what this looks like. That is the first published. Boy, the slide doesn't look that good, does it? My gosh, you can't see it. I'm hoping that I have a close-up somewhere. The typography is absolutely brilliantly elegant, right? Crisp, clean. Notice these wide margins, right? This thing was just about ready to be published, to be able to be sold. And Fust had spoken with Peter Schoeffer, the assistant, and had a side deal. On the day or two before they were going to release it, or maybe the month before they were going to release it, they took it away from Gutenberg. They locked him out of the shop, and they confiscated the whole process Fust did with Schoeffer. Okay? So basically, he took him to court and confiscated the whole thing. We have all this detail because they have the court proceedings written down, what happened. So Fust gets it, and he takes it. He, by the way, some people think that Gutenberg intended to do all those illustrations along the edge, and that would have had to have been hand done at the time. And I wonder if Fust's impatience had to do with, oh my gosh, we just got to get the money and we got to do something, right? So the initial edition, and I'm remiss, I can't remember how many they printed, darn it. I want to say it's like 40 of them, right? 40, the initial edition. Oh, by the way, some of them were printed on deer hide, and some of them were printed on paper. So some of them were real high dollar. Again, how much is that thing worth? Like $5 million bucks. Okay, so you're going to sell a bunch of Bibles like this, and you want to go to a place where they're going to want one, right? So he went to the University of Paris, and he goes to sell them. And when the professors and the priests and the monks look at this thing, what do you think they saw? What do you think they thought this was? It's the Middle Ages. Witchcraft. They thought it was because they were impressed with the first one. The second one, they got kind of an eerie feeling. The third one, literally, how the hell did you do that? Right? It has to be witchcraft. And so they had proceedings getting ready to burn Fust at the stake for witchcraft. No. Gutenberg is out of the picture by this time. Fust has cut him out, right? By the way, Peter Schoeffer ended up marrying Fust's daughter. So Fust, you're getting ready to be burned at the stake. What do you do? Remember, it's all secret processes, right? He explained the process. So instantly, because of this weird thing that had happened, the technology and the idea behind the technology spread to Paris. And so this kind of thing starts spreading everywhere.
How do you spell that guy's last name?
F-U-S-T. By the way, has anybody heard of the legend of Faust? Or Faustus? It's a guy, it's in operas and in poetry. Wolfgang Amadeus Goethe, I think it's Amadeus, wrote Faustus. And in that text, Faust makes a deal with the devil for power and wealth. But he sells his soul to the devil. Sounds, you can see this stuff in movies now, Anyway, you get so Fust was not well thought of, even back then. Meanwhile, people knew Gutenberg, was able to talk. He talked to the local duke, and he was able to get patronage to help him do another Bible. And so he prints his own Bible. You get a feel for what he was interested in doing in the 42-line Bible when he puts these illustrations around. All right, and just beautiful typography. Darn, I don't have a close-up. Anyway, all of this stuff is going. Look at the date, 1450-55, right? 1450. You write that date down, 1450. Okay? We suddenly are in a period that's very important to modern history. It's called the Incunabula. Incunabula. I'm going to try. I-N-C-U-N-A-B-U-L-A. I-N-C. I-N-C-U-B-U-L-A. Incunabula. It's Latin, isn't it? Right? What words does it remind you of? If I say incunabula, does it remind you of anything? Anybody ever been around when a baby's born? Huh? The incubator. They put a baby in an incubator, right? The idea there, and by the way, eggs, you put eggs in an incubator, right? If you're going to try to get hatched chickens. So this period, 1450 to 1500, is this period of hatching, of birthing, of the infancy of printing. Okay? Now, the value of a Bible at the beginning, before this, is like millions, right? I wonder how much a Bible was worth at the end of that 50-year period. Any ideas?
Probably less.
Huh?
Probably less.
Oh, yeah, much less. No. By the end of the end of that 50-year period, printing made its way to Italy, and they invented something called italics, which made it so that you could, and we'll talk about italics later, made it so that you could print very fine letters, very dense, so you could make smaller pages. You get these little, pocket New Testament, right? $1.50. $1.50. That's what mass production does for things. Okay, meanwhile, you guys gonna remember that story about Fust and the burning at the stake and all that junk? He was a real rat, wasn't he? Yeah. I mean, look, I can understand taking it over and say, look, no, you don't know what you're doing. We need to make some money. But to cut him out entirely, that's cold. All right. Meanwhile, this is going on. Oh, look at the date. Huh. By the way, this is, by the way, a set of playing cards by somebody called the Master of the Playing Cards. What do you think the Master of the Playing Cards is interested in doing with his identity, his or her identity? What do you think? Doesn't want to be known for this, right? Is hiding the fact that they're the person that did this. It's in 1450. It's produced in Mainz, Germany. Does that sound familiar? That's interesting. I wonder who was working like this at that time. Anyway, it's the first use of copper plate engraving for printing. Now, copper plate engraving is a very, very different technology than woodblock printing. You remember how we said to get the white, you have to carve away everything that is white, right? Well, in copper plate engraving, it's much easier. All you have to do is dig or incise into the surface of the metal in some way, and the ink is rubbed across that and then cleaned off, and the ink stays wherever the rough areas where you scratched it were, and then you press with a lot of pressure, and it presses deep into the paper and leaves the ink impression that you see here. So what you're looking at is the back of one of the playing cards. And what do you notice about the drawing in here? Very detailed. It seems like the artist has a lot more freedom than the woodblock printing would give you. Okay? So for instance, you see a lot of lines where you get thick and thin, or even fine shading in here. Little delicate lines are being created. So Zach, get off your phone, please. It's all good. We just want you in the room with me. It's all right. Anyway, very interesting. He keeps it secret. By the way, some scholars wonder if Gutenberg's imagination about the illumination that would go into his Bible included this kind of idea, that they would have printed these illustrations separately. All right. Fust and Schoeffer becomes a printing firm. And they are in business for hundreds of years. Very successful. And the red and blue initials are the earliest examples of color printing. This is where they did a separate run with the black, the red, and the blue. The black, the red. Look at this stuff. Beautiful. All right. Now, look. How did printing begin to spread initially? What caused it to spread? Quick. Fust, getting burned at the stake, or not, right? So if I don't want to be dinner, or if I don't want to be the torch for the evening, I got to tell them the whole story, right? The other thing, and this is one of these things about how technology spreads sometimes, or innovations spread, I should say. And then you get Adolf, not Adolf Hitler, Adolf of Nassau, who invades Mainz. I can't make this stuff up. He invades Mainz, and everybody runs away. Run away, right? Anybody see Monty Python and the Holy Grail? Run away, run away. Like, not retreat, run away. Bunch of printers run away from Mainz. And once you start running, sometimes you just keep going. Well, some of these guys made their way down to Italy. And that's how printing came to Italy. All right, you know what? This is what I wanted to get done today. Now listen, how many of you brought your text with you? Okay, one, maybe two. I am moving the open book quiz to Tuesday. All right? So it's kind of like a second chance for you. Put it in your phone, in your calendar. Get your phones out now and put it in your phone, in your calendar. And remember to bring your text on Tuesday.
Do you know our abstract?
That's on next Thursday.
Oh.
You got it done already, huh? Oh boy. See, now that's how to have a weekend. It's not on your mind. You get the stuff out of your hair right away. You have an easier time. I can't agree with you more about that. All right, and if you wanted to show me after we get done here, that'd be fun. Any questions for me at this time? Man, I can't believe that I got through this fast. Although I do want to end with this one idea. All right, don't shift and shuffle too much. So I asked this question about this new technology. Have a seat. I asked this question once before. I'm going to ask it again. We're going to talk about this again. This spread of technology has what kinds of effects? This particular technology, what kind of effect did it have on the culture?
Ideas.
Say again?
It gives people ideas.
It gives people ideas because now suddenly, who can read?
And
A lot more people, not everybody, but a lot more people can read because they can get their hands on books, and someone who already has letters can show them something or tell them something, okay? Was this good that this happened?
no. Yeah,
Was it-
somewhere.
Yes and no.
Yes and no, and that's not an equivocation. That means, yeah, it was really good because look, here we are, right?
Really bad.
And really bad because actually people died because of this thing happening. Because of the ideas of being able to compare bodies of knowledge and saying, well, I agree with that, but I don't agree with that anymore. That's what you say. I don't have to listen to you because I can listen to this. Very important, right? Very, very important. Can I tell you with this idea, with comparative, should we have that? Should we be able to compare these bodies of knowledge?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to say this too because we're all internet-ized, right? I make it my business. If when big things are happening in the world and the culture and our politics and all that stuff, I make it my duty as a good citizen to make sure that I listen to both sides. So I'll just use the example. Every darn day, I will spend my time in my car going home. I'll flip back and forth between NPR, National Public Radio, and the talk radio on the AM. So I'm getting the liberal perspective and the conservative perspective because if you only get the one perspective, you're only getting what they want you to think. And if you have only one channel, they can control you. That was, by the way, the situation with the Catholic Church before this happened. The sale of indulgences, right? Just on its face. That's corrupt, isn't it? Well, once people got these ideas, it changed the way we think. All right, that's all my thing for today. This poor guy that's doing this distance, he's going to get this whole shebang like that. I don't know what kind of feeling that gives when you're listening to it and you can't see everything else that's going on in the room, but we will find out.
So what are some key things I need for the abstract?